What's up, guys? It's MB Boxing, and today I'm going to be predicting the outcome of Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo. And this is going to be a 12-rounder for the undisputed WBC, WBA, WBO, and IBF Super Middleweight World Championship. And this fight is going to be Saturday, September 30th from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. And this fight is going to be broadcasted on Showtime pay-per-view. And to get into both fighters' resumes, Canelo Alvarez, fighting out of Mexico, holds an outstanding record of 59 wins, trying to get his 60th in this fight. He has 2 losses with 2 draws and 39 wins coming by way of knockout. He is the current number 1 rated super middleweight in the world by BoxRec and by many. And he is the current undisputed super middleweight champ, defending his titles here. He's also the former WBO light heavyweight world champion, the former WBA regular super middleweight champ, the former unified WBC, WBA, and IBF middleweight champion. He's also the former WBO super welterweight champion and the former unified WBC and WBA super welterweight world champion. And in a separate title reign, he was just the WBC middleweight world champion. So Canelo Alvarez, as most of you guys know, one of the most popular fighters in boxing today, has been there, done that in his career. And this is just another legacy fight for him, I would say. And to get into his resume, his losses, his draws, and his best wins, his most recent defeat obviously came at the hands of a unanimous decision loss to Dimitri Bivol. That fight, Bivol won pretty clearly, anywhere from 9-3 to 8-4. I thought Bivol won. And yeah, the judges got that one right in that one and didn't give it to the heavy A side. And then his first ever loss came by majority decision, although it should have been a wide unanimous decision against Floyd Money Mayweather. And then when it comes to his draws, he has a split decision draw to Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, in their first fight. That should have been a win, I thought, for Triple G. And then he also has a split decision draw over 4 rounds really early on in his career when he was younger than me, when he fought Jorge Juarez. But to list some of his best victories, he has a unanimous decision win and a majority decision win over Gennady Golovkin in their second and third fight. I thought the second fight, Triple G won again, but the third fight was definitely clear for Canelo Alvarez. I thought he won a 7-5, but, Triple G was just the older man in that one. And then some of his other best wins, he defeated Billy Joe Saunders by corner stoppage after 8, defeated Callum Smith by unanimous decision, knocked out Sergey Kovalev in 11, and got a TKO win over Caleb Plant in 11. And those are some of his best recent wins. He also has a lot of other wins in the past, especially over guys like Austin Trout and among others. But those are his best, most recent wins, especially in the super middleweight division. But to get into his opponent's resume, Jermell Charlo, he is currently not ranked by BoxRec due to inactivity. However, he is widely recognized and known for being the number 1 super welterweight fighter in the world today. And he holds a record of 35 wins with 1 loss and 1 draw, with 19 wins coming by way of knockout. And he is the current undisputed the undisputed WBC, WBA, WBO, and IBF super welterweight world champ. So, really, I've never seen this in my lifetime of watching fights, and I think this is super rare. I really don't even think this has ever happened in the 4-belt era. 2 undisputed champions going at it that both hold 4 belts in their respective weight classes. And it would be very, very interesting if Charlo is able to win here. He'd make history. I think he would be the first 2-weight undisputed champion at once, which would be very, very interesting. Very interesting. But there is also the fact that his WBO title could get taken away, or is going to eventually get taken away from him, obviously because Tim Tszyu is the interim champ. And I'm not saying that it's not rightful, because it is. He is stepping up 2 weight classes as opposed to defending his belt against fighters at his weight class. But, it is a super fight, and I have nothing wrong with this fight. I'm going to be 100% honest. But getting into Jermell Charlo's resume, the undisputed super welterweight champ, his 1 loss came by unanimous decision to Tony Harrison in their first fight. I thought he beat Harrison pretty clearly. I thought the judges robbed him on that night. That happened in December of 2018. And then his 1 draw, I thought he should have lost this fight clearly. It came by split decision against Brian Castano in their first fight. I thought Castano won a clear and easy 8-4, 7-5, 100%. But when it comes to his best victories, His most recent win was I believe it was 17 months ago or something like that, where he defeated Brian Castano in their rematch. It was a flawless victory by him. In the rematch, KO'd Castano in 10 rounds. Another one of his better wins is a KO win with a brutal jab to the body over Jason Rosario, back when Rosario was the unified champion. He also has a KO win in 11 over Tony Harrison in their rematch. He has a majority decision victory as well over Austin Trout, and a KO win in 1 over Erickson Lubin, who's also fighting on this main card against Jesus Ramos. So in my opinion, like I said before, this is a very, very good fight. I'm pretty excited for it. At first, when I saw this fight get announced, I don't know what I was thinking in my head. I was like, oh, it's just an easy fight for Canelo. But really, when you analyze it, these two guys are definitely top 10 pound for pound. I believe on my list right now, Canelo would probably be number 4 pound for pound. And Jermell Charlo would be number 8 pound for pound on my list. So both these guys are some of the best fighters in the world, in my opinion. And I would assume most people agree with that these two fighters are definitely top 10 pound for pound, I would say. 2 undisputed champions in the sport. But more back into their fight. I mean, as time started going on and I started really doing more research on this fight, obviously I was well known to these fighters prior to this fight being announced, but really just watching more of Jermell Charlo's style and how Canelo looked in his last fight against Ryder. The later rounds could be a problem for Canelo Alvarez in this one. Jermell Charlo performs very well in the later rounds of his fights, and I think this one's going to be very, very competitive and very close. I just think it's going to be a very close fight in the end. But yeah, I mean, if you made it this far in the video, 7 minutes in just about now, I'd really appreciate if you guys go comment down below your thoughts and your prediction on this fight. Hit the subscribe button and hit the like button as well. But back into my prediction on this one, just to get into how I see this fight going round by round. I think the sort of first half of this fight, I think Canelo Alvarez will sort of be controlling. I mean, against John Ryder, he looked very solid in the first half. He was just peppering Ryder with the better shots. And in Jermell Charlo's last fight against Brian Castano, the earlier rounds, he was that was like the worser point in that fight for him. I don't even know if that's a word, but or if I used it correctly. But he performed worse in the earlier rounds against Castano in that second fight, and it was much closer. And then the later rounds, Jermell Charlo picked it up just as he did against Tony Harrison in their rematch. So Jermell Charlo, like I said before, a very strong fighter in the later rounds, tends to rough his opponents up very well. And I mean, you got to remember, he's moving up 2 weight classes for this fight. But the good thing is for Charlo, it's not like Canelo's a massive super middleweight. He's a very small super middleweight. He's only 5'8". Jermell Charlo is about 5'11", I think, 5'10 and a half, something like that. So obviously when you see them standing next to each other, Jermell really looks like the natural 168-pounder. But yeah, I don't really think, obviously there's going to be any problem with size because Jermell is obviously the bigger man physically with height and whatnot. But when it comes to the strength and physicality, maybe being in the clinch, I think that Charlo could have some problems because Canelo Alvarez is very, very strong, especially on the inside. And when it comes to, I mean, just Canelo is very, very conditioned as well. But obviously against John Ryder, he had some trouble in those later rounds. Obviously he wasn't hurt or getting dominated, but it was much more competitive in those later rounds. And John Ryder, I would say Charlo is definitely a better fighter than John Ryder. But who knows? We'll have to see what goes on in this one, how Charlo takes some of Canelo's shots. But yeah, just to stop getting sidetracked, back into how this fight's going to go round by round. Like I said before, the earlier rounds, I would say probably are going to go in Canelo's favor. I think Canelo's going to start out a bit stronger. I think maybe the first 3 rounds could be close, but I think overall in the first half, Canelo will have more control, win more rounds. It could be pretty similar to like when Canelo fought Caleb Plant, like he gave up some of the earlier rounds just by figuring out his style. I could see Jermell Charlo winning some of those early rounds, just moving around a bit on the outside. And I know Jermell Charlo isn't like a boxer mover type guy. He's a pretty good conventional puncher. He has a very good 1-2 as well. And I really think that he'll be able to land some very good jabs on Canelo in the earlier part of the fight, most likely in the first 3 rounds of this one, I think he could be up 29-28. Could be 29-28 either way in the first 3 rounds, but I think that they could be pretty close. Could be some feel out rounds in there early, with Charlo just trying to land his shots from mid range a bit, just land 1-2s, and Charlo sits down on his punches a bit. He's not a fighter who moves on his toes often and moves around the ring like that. And he's a fairly good counterpuncher as well. But yeah, Jermell Charlo has some good power, and I'm wondering to see how that will play out moving up 2 weight classes if he's able to keep Canelo off him. And I'm assuming that he will, considering he's just a world-class fighter in his own right. But yeah, I think the first couple rounds in this one could be pretty competitive. Could be 29-28 either way after 3. Could be 38-38, 39-37 in favor of Canelo Alvarez after 4. And I really think throughout this fight, Canelo is going to be the one sort of pressing the pace going forward a bit. Because I think for Charlo, that's not going to be the smartest option for him. And then I think that Canelo Alvarez will start to pick it up a bit in those middle rounds, around like 5, 6, and 7. I think that he'll start to pick some shots on Jermell Charlo. I think that Charlo obviously will still make it pretty competitive in those rounds. And even though people are saying Canelo, he's over the hill a bit, I do agree his performance against John Ryder wasn't that stellar, but I think he's obviously going to be training much, much harder, much, much more. There's much, much more on this fight in this one. And I'm not saying that, he just didn't try against Ryder. But, I mean, obviously, many fighters, their mental game is different each fight, especially when it's of a higher magnitude. This one, big pay-per-view fight, big press around this one, hype around this one. So I really think that Canelo's going to perform pretty well in this one, and I think both fighters are going to put on a very solid show. So yeah, in those middle rounds, I think Canelo Alvarez is going to start to pick up the pace and start to swing the fight a bit in his favor, and I think that he'll start to land some more shots to the body a bit on Charlo, start to walk him down a bit, and I think that Charlo will still be trying to land some counters on Canelo Alvarez, but he's got to remember, Canelo has very, very good head movement, and Canelo is also a very, very good counterpuncher as well. Going forward, Canelo is able to slip punches when he's the one moving forward, which is also a very, very big part of his game, his defense. Canelo Alvarez is not really known for being a guy who gets hurt, gets hit a lot. But when he fought Dimitri Bivol, obviously Bivol was a much, much bigger guy, was able to pick some shots on him, specifically jabs and straights. But Jermell Charlo, obviously he's bigger than Canelo, but not as big as Bivol was. So I don't really think Canelo is going to be having much difficulty with that if Jermell Charlo fully decides to just play it cool, play it safe, and box a bit. But I really think that in those middle rounds, Canelo will pick it up, have the better work, and I think that after like 7 rounds, 8 rounds, this fight could be, let's say after 7 rounds, could be 68-65, 67-66. In Canelo Alvarez's favor. It could be pretty close like that because, like I said before, Charlo will make this fight very, very competitive throughout. And then when it comes to those later rounds, I could see them being very, very close. I think that at the start of them, Canelo Alvarez will edge them, like rounds 8, 9, and 10 he could edge. And then I think, or rounds 8 and 9, I think Canelo will start to stake some claim in, just start to really work on Charlo a bit. But like I said before, Charlo will make every round competitive. And I think that, like I said before, throughout this fight, just Jermell Charlo will be in there. I don't think one guy will be dominated in this one. I know I said that in the Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence fight, and Spence ended up getting dominated. But, like I said, like everyone says in boxing, you never know. So, yeah, but obviously when it comes to on paper, this fight should be fairly competitive throughout. And I think at the start of those later rounds, Canelo will get the edge of Charlo a bit. And after 9 rounds, it could be like 87-84 for Canelo. Could even be closer than that in some judges' scorecards, being swayed by either fighter's style. Could be a bit wider than that in some judges' scorecards. And then I think Jermell Charlo could sweep the last 3 rounds because he's very strong, like I said before, in the later rounds. He could take 2 of them, but in the end, I think that Jermell Charlo could win up to 6 rounds, 5 rounds, or even 4 rounds in this fight. But I think overall Canelo Alvarez will have the edge in more than half of the rounds in this one. I think that Canelo Alvarez could win like 7 rounds, 8 rounds, something like that in this one. I think he'll just have more work over Jermell Charlo, but I think it will be a pretty solid fight, especially a decent one to score. And I think that in the end, I'm going to be picking, or my official pick is Canelo Alvarez by a 12-round decision. I'm not going to pick like whether it's going to be unanimous, split, majority, because you never know with these judges in these big fights. But I think Canelo is going to get that decision victory over Jermell Charlo. But I think that from the fans' perspective, it's probably going to be anywhere between like a 6-6 to an 8-4 type fight for Canelo. There could be a lot of decent close rounds that could go either way. But it could be 114, 114, 115, 113, or 116, 112 in Canelo's favor, in my opinion. So overall, I believe that Canelo Alvarez will remain the undisputed super middleweight champion, as I think he will defeat the undisputed super welterweight champion Jermell Charlo by decision to get his 60th victory as a pro. And yeah, that's really it. I'm MB Boxing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.